Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Unfiltered. I am your host, Kaiya McCullough, and I am so excited to bring you another episode of this wonderful podcast I have created. You already know what it is. We're going to talk about the intersection of race and politics, sports, pop culture, you name it. We're talking about it completely unfiltered through the lens of my life experience. And on that note, I have another really special guest this week, somebody who has quite literally made me the woman I am today, and I'm honestly not really sure if I'd be alive without her. So I'm super excited to have her on to talk about our lives together, and that is my cousin, McKenna Bonds. She's honestly more like a sister. We're only 7 months apart. I'm older, but yeah, so I'm super excited to have her here, and we're basically going to be talking about how it was growing up together as two young Black biracial girls in Southern California, which definitely had its problems, and how our identities were shaped and influenced by each other, and how that, made us the women that we are today. So I'm super excited to have her on. Keep listening. It's going to be a great conversation, and I'm super excited for you guys to be here. Hello, McKenna.
Hello.
Would you like to introduce yourself to the pod? Yes, no, maybe so. God.
How should I introduce myself?
Just your name, what you do, the vibes.
Sure. Well, as Kaiya said, I am Kaiya's cousin, but I'm more like her sister. My name is McKenna. I'm currently in school. Hopefully, I should be done shortly, and I will be a designer. So yeah, hopefully everything goes well within the next month. No more corona.
No more
worsening.
corona. Yeah, you're gonna have to. I'm gonna
Worsening,
put your ats. I'm gonna put your ats at the end of this episode so people can hit you up to have you design their houses for them.
Yeah.
Got to get that networking in.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm going to share a story. You can let me know if you remember this, if you don't, but I start the podcast by telling a story that kind of familiarizes the listeners and the viewers with my guest. So this one really jumped out at me. So anybody who knows me probably knows I really like Disneyland. And I mean, I used to go with my dad 2 to 3 times a week growing up, and a lot of times Kenna would come with us. And for not obvious reasons, people used to think that we were twins a lot of the times, which I don't really get because we don't look super similar, but you know how white people are in Orange County. But I remember my favorite ride now is Indiana Jones. I remember the very first time that I rode it. It was with my dad and with McKenna, and we went on. We waited in line for like an hour. The ride is super scary for young people, like for sure. Like it's a whole bunch of like hellfire imagery and ghosts shooting you and bugs and rats, and I was so excited to see it. Like I was so excited for my dad to be so proud of me. And the entire first time I closed my eyes. And after we got off the ride, my dad was like, well, McKenna kept her eyes open. Like McKenna, was brave enough to keep her eyes open the whole ride. And I was just devastated because I was like such a scaredy cat. And so I literally made us go back in line to wait for like another hour, half hour. And I made us ride the ride again so that I could be brave like her. And I think that is a good kind of reflection of how our relationship is now. Even though I'm older, I learn a lot from her all the time. And I always try and be brave like her. But yeah, do you remember that?
I don't. I really don't. See, I remember us going to Disneyland, but I don't remember the events that occurred while at Disneyland, other than the restroom trip.
Yeah. I mean, that probably like sticks out to me because how traumatic it was, because I was literally so embarrassed. I felt like a failure to my father, like because that was his favorite ride too. And like you were so brave. And I was just like, I suck.
No, you don't. No, you didn't.
Okay, well, that's actually a good segue story into the first topic. And it's kind of about our childhood and how similar and how different we were growing up, but how, a lot of the times we only really had each other to look to as like an example of a black biracial person around us. Whether that was because we both lived with our mothers together. Oh yeah, background. We lived together growing up. So after my parents got divorced, we moved in. Our mothers are sisters. And so we moved in together. We lived together in a house. So we really are like sisters when I say that. Um, so whether our identities being very parallel were because, we were surrounded by our white mothers and white people in South Orange County, or I don't know another reason. Needless to say, we were always compared and always contrasted, and a lot of times blend. And so one of the things that I remembered and I wanted to talk about was how we got the name Micaiah.
Oh
Do you remember
Lord,
that?
I
Yeah.
do.
So people like would literally get so confused by us because we were the only like little black biracial girls that they literally couldn't remember who we were. And our moms would just be like, "Yeah, just call him Micaiah, it's easier." So, what are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that now?
I mean, I kind of like it. I think it's kind of cute. I mean, because we were always together, so it was like the both of us. I don't know. It was like our identity,
Yeah.
so to speak. Like if somebody seen you or I, it was the both of us. So I mean, as long as we were still Kenna and Kaya, but like together we were Micaiah.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually really cute.
Maybe I think that would be selfish of me to name, like, a daughter with the name Micaiah, because my name's Kaya, but that's a cute little name if I do say so myself.
You can use my middle name.
I'm going to, don't worry. Um,
Ooh,
I already told you that.
I know, but ooh, spilling the beans.
No, but yeah, I think, like, the whole Micaiah thing is, like, a really good introductory point into how combined our identities were, and, you know, growing up, I think we paralleled each other in a lot of ways. Obviously, we were very different. I was more sporty, you were more
Hmm.
artistic than me, but we still were very similar. Can you talk about a little bit about how growing up in South Orange County surrounded by people who didn't look like you was?
Yeah. Um, I actually remember in elementary school not having anybody look like me. There was probably like one little boy that looked like me. And then as I got a little bit older, my mom introduced me to cheer and I started cheering for Pop Warner. And when I did that, I kind of realized that there was and wasn't a lot of people that looked like me. There were people that looked like me, but they didn't look exactly like me, obviously, because they weren't black, but they were still part of a like minority. Um, but yeah, it was very interesting, like growing up not seeing people that look like you, because I mean, you're young enough to not understand like maybe why they don't look like you, but you notice it. It's not something that is like going to stand out to you like at my age now, where I can obviously see it and kind of pinpoint it. Then I didn't really know how to address it. So I think it was something that was like more on the back burner of my life. Like, yes, I acknowledged it, but no, it wasn't like a focus. But I could definitely tell, like, I felt as though sometimes I would be treated differently in certain scenarios, in comparison to like the other little girls, obviously, because I was, the curly haired girl that is a little bit darker, that doesn't look like any of the other girls here, that has a little bit more of an attitude. Well, not really, but like I had an attitude growing up. So, a little bit more of an attitude like than these other girls. Like I was not taking nothing from anybody. I still don't. But back then you couldn't tell me nothing. So like it was very different from like the little girls that I grew up against, like around.
Yeah, and I think that goes I have shared a very similar experience to anybody who knows me, not really growing up around people who looked like me, but that's why I'm saying I think I didn't really realize the impact of having you around specifically until I
Exactly.
was a lot older because I didn't realize how much that helped guide me in my own identity formation, because honestly, like, I've mentioned this before even on this podcast, like, I grew up not really I literally, when I was younger, could not figure out why I did not look like my mom. Like, I had different hair, different skin, didn't look like her really, and it bothered me, but I think the thing that kind of grounded me a lot of times was the fact that, okay, I have a family member who looks very, very, very similar to me and who I can see myself in, and I think I think it was really important for me having somebody who at least, even if we didn't acknowledge it, like, consciously, it was very important having somebody whose experiences would mirror mine because I could see myself in somebody, and I didn't have to
Yeah.
necessarily look towards the television to see myself in somebody else. And it's interesting, it's just an interesting dynamic because you're younger than me, and, like, I feel like a lot of people, you know, put something in being older than other people, but I don't know, I just have always been very guided by you, and I guess, do you feel similarly? Do you feel different? Expand on that.
Um, Now that I think about it as we're talking about it, I think there's something very comforting about the fact that like we would go into environments where, there wasn't people that look like us, but we would have each other at the end. So like I'm thinking of this is a story, I guess you can say. But like when we would go to the SWAT meet, like we didn't
Oh,
look like anybody there. We did not, but like we look like each other. So it was like comforting for the fact that like, okay, well, I have Kaiya with me. So like if they're looking at me, they're looking at the both of us. Like it wasn't a feeling of like, okay, well, at least I have somebody that looks like me because we were literally always together. We did a
yeah,
lot of activities together. So I think it became very normal for us to have like the comfort of each other, and I think that's helped us as we've like gotten older. There's a lot of similarities between us. I mean, yes,
yeah.
we have our differences, but like I think in the end it's bonded us a lot more than like anything else has, just
Yeah,
similar situations.
no, 100%. As you were talking, I was just remembering that one photo at the swap meet where we're
Yes.
we're, like, back to back. We need to recreate that. I'm for sure gonna link that, photo
Yeah,
in this
I'll have to
episode
see it.
because it really does just reflect, like, our camaraderie and having each other. And, you said that that experience bonded us, but I also there's been a lot of stuff in our life, like,
Yes,
trauma-wise, that has bonded us. Um,
absolutely.
how do you think that has, like, informed our relationship, with each other, and how do you think, that's influenced us growing up together?
Well, from childhood to adulthood, we've dealt with a lot. But I don't know. I think still just on the comfort level, like there's a different amount of comfort that I think you get when you have at least like a sibling
Yeah.
or someone close to you. And it almost felt as though like I say this all the time that like we must have been twin sisters or something in a past life with
Yeah.
like our connection to each other because the way that we are, I don't know, like the way that we work together is really actually fascinating. Um, in a lot of like we get along so well. Yes, we fight like sisters, but we also get along probably better than sisters in other scenarios. But I think that's what's like helped us because we've always been the glue for the other person when we needed them in a traumatic situation. And if one of us, doesn't know how to deal with something, I feel like the other one has more of like an answer or an idea of how to deal with it. So in that case, we've always, been what we needed to for the other person. And plus, we've gone through like the traumatic situations together, so we've always been able to kind of count on the other one as like one is not doing so well, the other one can, step up and be that for the other.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's crazy because I see that direct line of, like, dealing with really traumatic situations as kids together. Like, I see that direct line to how we deal with traumatic situations together now or separate, but, like, my trauma response, especially when it has to do with you, I get, like, so, so, so protective, and I feel like that's a direct, like, correlation from what happened to us when we were younger. And obviously, like, we
yeah,
don't need to get into all of that now, but, I mean, I think it just goes to show, again, just re-emphasizing, like, how important it is having people who look like you and who can empathize with you and who can sympathize with you and sit there and understand and, help you carry the burden of life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say that having each other was a real blessing in disguise. Like, I know the circumstances that led us to living together and being so
Yeah.
close, like, weren't necessarily super ideal, but,
Mhm.
I mean, in the end, I think it was the best
Worked
situation for all
out.
of us. Yeah,
Definitely.
one way or another. So, kind of segueing from that, we lived together. I don't even again, people, as you listen and watch this podcast, like, you'll realize I have a really convoluted sense of time when it comes to my childhood. I think it's a trauma
Me too.
response. I'm working through it in therapy, but so I don't know the exact years or dates that we lived together, but I do know after my parents got divorced, we moved in together. We lived in Mission Viejo, and then you and your mom moved away to Ontario, which is a lot more diverse. It's in the IE. So
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk about that transition for you. I mean, honestly, I feel like I don't even know very much about this, so I'm really curious to hear. Like, what was that transition like from you going to an area that was predominantly white, into an area that was predominantly like people of color? And was that experience different or harder for you, being that it was you and your mom who is white? So I'm curious.
Yeah. So I remember what age I moved out there. I remember I started probably, it was like February of my fifth grade, when I
Okay.
moved out there. So I was a little bit older at this point. But it was complete 180 from Orange County, completely, like completely. And I think that was probably one of the best things that my mom could have done for me. Little does
Yeah.
she probably think so, but like the experiences that I've gotten from living out there, other than from going to college, like was was what I needed because I started to see
Yeah.
more people that look like me. Yes, I felt as though I couldn't fit in a lot in Orange County, but in some ways, like I felt the same way where I lived in the Inland Empire. I don't want to say this, but like I'm a pretty light skinned girl, who is, I, yeah, exactly that basically. But like it was hard for me to sometimes fit in with, the people of color because, I wasn't dark enough or my hair wasn't curly enough for them. Or like it was like I wasn't meeting their standards, neither was I in Orange County. So sometimes I would feel like, I couldn't really fit on either end. But I felt like there was more people that, were biracial, and
Yeah.
that kind of could understand, like the things that I would go through on an everyday basis out here versus in Orange County. It was it was completely different because I started to actually feel like, okay, maybe I could fit in here. Because as I look around, it's predominantly people that look like me, or have an idea of what I've gone through for the past few years of my life.
Do you think that like, experience was just really affirming for you? I know you said that obviously moving to a new area in and of itself is gonna be, like, a huge adjustment, and then adjusting to essentially what is an entirely different culture.
Yeah.
Um, do you think overall, though, it was really affirming for you just having more people who weren't me that actually looked like you?
Yes. I mean, I we still would drive all the way out to come see you guys every once
Yeah.
in a while. But like it just was a good feeling to know like there was more people that like look like me. And I had, different influences and I felt like I learned more about, people of color and my side of people of color when I moved to the Inland Empire versus when I lived in Orange County. I had more influences with my hair or like what to do, yeah, hair wise, skin, like all of it. It was like more so like people were trying to show me because unfortunately for my mom, she is a white woman. So, she wasn't the best with my hair, um, and all of that. Childhood pictures can speak for themselves. But like for me to be around people that kind of knew stuff like that and could help me was something big for me. Like I finally knew, what type of product to put in my hair that would make it look nice or like how to do my hair in certain styles that would, benefit me and look pretty. So for me, it was literally completely different from what I would experience if I feel like if I would have lived in Orange County.
Well, and I think that, like, not to not to, like, make this, like, weird, but, I mean, we really are kind of like a social experiment because we grew up with very similar backgrounds, we grew up together, and then we kind of
Hmm. Split
diverged, and
off.
even the way, like, seeing the differences between us, not that, they're not, like, super huge or anything, but just seeing the differences between us, especially with people who know us, and, kind of analyzing how much of that was a product of, like, where we grew up, I think is really interesting, and
Yeah.
especially when we talk about it in the context of, like, the bubble of Orange County, which, as you know, is, like, very conservative, very religious, like, very white, um, and, like, conversations that I've had with my friends basically being like, "Yeah, I really couldn't see past this, like, bubble that was clouding us." I think it's really interesting just to see, even though I wasn't necessarily living under the haze of the bubble, like, I'm
Yeah.
woke as fuck, like, whatever, I managed to escape it, but just even just, like, in our diction, like, the way we
Yes.
think differently, the people that we date,
Oh, yep.
it's
That
just
as well.
I mean, it's significant, and I think it just goes to show, like, how much impact the environment that, you grow up in has on you, and I think why it's important that we start having people that look like us, like, be around us all the time, because
Yeah.
I often wonder, like, what would have happened if I would've moved out there
Moved
with
with
you
me.
guys, like, who I who I would have been, and, like, how my experiences would have been differently informed.
Yeah.
Um Another thing one thing I wanted to touch on was both of us, I mean, less so me, but both of us were raised by single mothers predominantly.
Hmm.
What how do you think that that experience has, like, transformed your worldview? Whether that's on men or just, how society treats women, or I don't know, anything kind of relating to that. What do you think How do you think that's impacted your growth and, like, your development as a woman of color?
Um, well, I think one of the like biggest things that my mom being a single mother has shown me is just independence.
Yeah.
For me, independence is my biggest thing. That's like one of my downfalls, I'd say, in a relationship. I'm not affectionate. I love my independence and I love, my solidarity. I love to be alone. Um, and I've seen that with my mom. She has so much strength in being able to be alone. And I think one thing that I've learned actually now at my age, and I'm not very old, but I feel like I've learned, and I think it's something that people forget a lot is like this idea of being alone is not a bad thing. There's not a
Yeah.
negative that comes from being alone, and being alone does not make you lonely. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. And I think being able to be alone is a very strong characteristic that a lot of people kind of overlook because there's so much strength in being able to, function on your own and at that raise a child. Um, which I can only, applaud my mom so much for being able to do it the way that she did, because I think I came out, a great woman. But I
I do.
do appreciate the fact that, she showed me that like you can be alone and be strong and okay. And just because others, may view you as lonely doesn't mean that you are. Um, I don't know. I think independence is beautiful, and I think it's something that people need to appreciate and kind of celebrate a little bit more. I feel like we um, look at this idea, and especially with social media, we come up with these ideas of like we have to have somebody else in order to be happy, and we put ourselves in situations with people whether we're happy or not because we feel as though it would be in the best interest of the child.
Yeah.
In reality, sometimes it won't be such. So sometimes I wonder, like, if my mom wasn't a single mother, if I would, be the same person I am today, and have like a lot of the strength that I do have today.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't want to test it. I wouldn't want to go back in time and change it any other way. I
Yeah.
like the woman that I've become and who I'm becoming. But I think it's really important to just realize like independence is beautiful.
Hey, I'm with you there. As you're
And these men are terrible right now at our age. Like, I'm sorry, but they don't know what commitment is. So I'm not going to commit to anybody else.
Hey, you're preaching to the choir here.
I know we
I
got the same head for that.
I say that stuff on social media all the time, so that's no surprise to anybody. But as we were talking about that, especially like with independence and, having single mothers or just having honestly like I don't go a lot into like describing my family structure with like new people because it is so blended and it is so
Yeah,
atypical. But I do think that there's a certain power and gift and love that becomes so much more emphasized when it becomes a case of like where you get to pick the community that you're surrounded by. Like you get to pick the people that we don't have a very huge family, and so we
yeah,
oftentimes got to create like our own sense of family and a create our own like family structure that worked for us. And I think honestly it personally like influenced me in a really positive way. Like being able to live in a household with like all women might sound very like daunting for some, but I mean for me I think it really was something that you know made me the strong woman that I am today. Like you said, like just
yeah.
independent, fiercely independent. Like our moms always handled their business. Like I know my mom was like pregnant and putting herself through a master's program while watching Grammy, like as she was deteriorating mentally. So like have I think develop this strength of self and this independence, like being surrounded by your mom and my mom and you, and just seeing like, we're women, but we can have it fucking all. Like we really can have it all. And,
And unapologetically.
yeah, and we can create these systems of support that aren't dependent or inherent on like a man necessarily.
Yeah,
Like we can be we can develop correctly and we can become strong without like the presence of like necessarily a male figure. And I know I had my dad and like that's a whole complicated history. And he was very much present in my life, but I really do like like I feel such power from reflecting on like where we came from and how
mhm.
we were. Um but yeah, so I one thing I wanna touch on too is, like, code switching. I don't know if you code switch. I don't hear you code switch very often.
Code
Um,
switching as in
as in, like I mean, for me, like, when I'm in my white bubble, I speak differently than when I'm especially
yeah.
around you. Like, it happens mostly when I'm with you, to be honest, or when I'm around other Black folks or, with other people of color where I'm more comfortable, and obviously, like, I wasn't raised in an area where I learned to talk a certain way, but just being around like all the people of color and the black people that I've had in my life, like there definitely is that aspect of there. What do you think is, a benefit of code switching and why do you even think it's like necessary for us to be able to do? And like what are the implications of that in society? Sorry, that's a loaded question, but
Yeah, I'll start off with I actually do it on an everyday basis. I code switch on and off of my schoolwork. So I'm entering a career field that is predominantly, white.
yeah.
And it's a lot of women as well. So I have learned that I need to, is this repeating? I feel like I can hear myself.
Oh, no, you're good.
Okay. But I'm entering a field, where I feel like I have to sometimes kind of make myself a little bit more presentable, because I am in competition. And sometimes, if it is an industry that is predominantly white, why are they going to choose the girl that's biracial who doesn't speak as properly as, the white woman that speaks properly? So I realize that a lot of times in my everyday life, I have to speak more predominantly. And but when I go home or, when I'm around my friends, I notice I do code switch, or even around family more so. Like I'm more comfortable with you guys. So, I mean, I don't really care to like impress you with my conversations. Like I'm not going to use my big words to try to get you to like catch on because I know you're going to be like, McKenna, what? Like, just say what you're trying to say. But like sometimes it's very necessary.
Yeah, and I think the fact that it is necessary is just a reflection of, like, how fucked up and how
Yeah.
demented the white supremacist system that we live in is. I know for me, like, I think that's a reflection of just the bigger theme of, like, having throughout my life to try and compartmentalize myself into some appropriate version of myself, that was palatable for white people. You know, I couldn't be too black. I couldn't,
Yep.
I couldn't do anything that would, make me be the other. I had to fit into
Yeah.
this mold that was appropriate for being surrounded by whiteness. And I mean, I almost envy you in the fact that like you moved away and were able to like get out of that
Yeah.
constant because it was traumatic. Like it really is. And like not in the way where like, I had like a bunch of violent like racial slurs or like I was getting constantly bullied for the way I looked, but in the sense like it is violence being surrounded by like people who constantly are using like microaggressions around you or who are constantly, you know, creating this racial trauma that I couldn't even begin to process until I was in my 20s, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, shit, I'm working through it now in therapy, but I mean, I do. Like I almost envy you and um your escape from from Orange County.
What's
Because I mean,
funny, I hate to cut you off, but what's funny is I notice a lot of my black friends will make comments about me speaking a bit more proper. Like sometimes um I'll flip my switch and not even acknowledge it. And now I'm talking proper to my friends and they'll be like, McKenna, why are you talking like that? But a lot of them, see, I don't hear code switching. I've heard the term ebonics, like you turn your ebonics on and off. So like sometimes I'll be a little more ratchet with what I say, or like a little bit more turned up. And then with some things, I'll be a little bit more like, okay, don't talk like that. Let's get it together. You need to say what you need to say and say it, in a nice manner. Because I'm not gonna go around my white family and just be like, about whatever it is the topic is because I know they're gonna not understand. So I have
yeah.
to, not dumb it down, but like put it into words where they'll be able to understand it, and vice versa for other groups.
Well, I think that raises an important point about like why I think it's necessary for people of color and like especially Black people to have safe spaces. I know
Mm-hmm.
people like call that like liberal propaganda, like liberal tears kind of stuff. But I mean, I honestly do think it's really important for Black people to have a space where they feel comfortable enough to, you know, carry on our culture, our perception of the world to be able to alleviate ourselves from, again, the constant racial trauma that happens living in a white supremacist society. Um, so it's interesting that you say that because, like, I do, like, you wouldn't say that stuff in front of our white family. And I
Yeah.
do think it's necessary to have like those spaces, those safe spaces as Black people. And honestly, like, I think that's a really good way to put into words, like, how our relationship is, like, you honestly are a safe space for me. Like, that
Mm-hmm.
is the best way that I can express it. Like, it's just a safe space to be unapologetically myself, with somebody who is maybe not an exact reflection, but definitely a reflection of, like, my own life experiences and
Yeah.
the
Very
things that I've
similar.
gone through. So, segueing, because we kinda talked about family and that, what do you think are some of the struggles of, like, growing up with a white family? And on that, like, what do you think white families with either black or biracial children, black biracial children need to know about, you know, making sure that your black child feels appreciated and loved and supported and accepted and acknowledged?
Yeah. Speaking from personal experience, I'd say there's a difference between just claiming somebody as, your family because you have to versus actually, being there and taking the time to kind of understand a little bit more of like their everyday battles. It's very easy, to claim someone like me being, your daughter or your cousin because I am and me being Black, but there's more to it than just acknowledging that. And I think a lot of times it's easy for them to acknowledge that, but they don't acknowledge what comes with it. And that's what they need to acknowledge more so, I would say. Like, I get that it's, sometimes hard to understand, the type of things that you and I go through as biracial women. But I think that's where, it's time to step up and kind of take the initiative to learn. And I think that's something important that, families can realize is that, like, you have to be willing to kind of understand what we go through every day because yes, I get both the best of both worlds. I get to learn about each culture and be a part of each, but it's hard sometimes to balance the two. And I think sometimes it can be hard for them to realize that I can't just shut off my Black side or I can't just shut off my white side. Like, that's still a part of me, whether I'm with my white family or my Black family. Um, I don't know. That's something, we both have struggled with in our adulthood. And I don't know. I think there's just a lack of understanding or almost some, I don't know, like a not wanting to understand, which can hold people back. And I think that's something that not only can affect the family, but like me as an individual, as someone, who's trying to help you to understand me and, both sides of who I am, because they both make up me, not just one side. I'm not just, white or I'm not just Black. I'm both, whether, I am identifying as a Black or white woman.
Yeah. That just just brought up a lot of feelings for me. I think on one hand, like exactly what you said. The funny thing about what you said is that in talking to a lot of the Black biracial like individuals that I know in my personal life, that experience is kind of universal. Like it's not just, our family. That happens
Yeah.
across the board. And I think that speaks to like a bigger issue of I'm not arguing against like integration and like multiracial marriages, but I mean, I think, if you are in a position where you're white and you have a family member who is a person of color, I think it's really, really, really important that you do the work to inform yourselves about their experiences and you do the work to make sure that, you're not dismissing one side of their identity
Hmm.
just because it's comfortable for you. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, it is your duty as somebody who I mean, honestly, it doesn't have to be your duty, but if you are choosing to be in somebody's life, I think it is your responsibility to make sure that you are putting yourself in the best position to love them and appreciate them and accept them wholly as they are. And if you're not doing that work to do that, then that's a bigger discussion. And
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times in these family structures, like that isn't happening. That acknowledgement that there even is problems that those kids may face is an issue. And like you said, like we've experienced this in our life and it sucks and it hurts and it's not fun. And so, I mean, for anybody listening, like who does have a family member who is a different race than them and who may have different life experiences than you, like it is your job to step the fuck up, especially if you're white. Like it is your job to step the fuck up and educate yourself because it shouldn't be my job to relay all my trauma to you to make you feel bad for or to make
Yeah.
you like want to learn about me. Like that's
Yeah.
not my responsibility.
Yeah. No. And nobody is probably going to be comfortable enough to just step up and tell you every traumatic event that's happened.
Yeah.
That's probably very rare unless you're a therapist. And even then, it might be rare for me to just straight up spill it.
Yeah. And that's like a lot of the issue that I see with like a lot of the anti-racist work that's like happening right now, especially like with the white community. Like I feel like a lot of times they're kind of spurred into action once something traumatic to a Black person happens, or like once there's like, some Black person gets killed or a person of color, is dies in like a really traumatic way. Like I feel like a lot of
Hmm.
times their character is triggered by some sort of like Black trauma, and that to me is really messed up, and I think that's like a big issue again. about like the way that a lot of like activism right now is happening because it is so reactionary and it's not like people just wanting to be informed for the sake of being informed. Um,
Yeah,
it's more so that they can like put the label on themselves, like I'm not a racist, like I'm not a racist. But yeah, do
bingo.
you I was gonna say, do you feel similar?
Definitely.
And
I
I
have
know
to agree.
I'm a lot more vocal than you on like social media and stuff, but like, do you see similar patterns like in your everyday life?
Yeah. And I feel like all the time there's excuses made for people. Um, I think we're at the age and the stage of our generation where the excuses need to go. Like it's time for you to step up and do the work to learn, or you're going to continue to lose people in your life.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
nobody has to stay in your life. That's kind of the thing. But I say you should be, putting forth the effort to learn. I don't
Yeah.
see what the problem in learning is. I mean, I think learning is great. So,
Yeah. And it's not my goal to make this like a trauma porn podcast. Like I don't want to bring people on here and like talk about their traumas to like spur people to want to
hmm
care. Like that's exactly the opposite of what I want to do. But how do you think like your trauma, whether that's familial, whether that's with race, whether that's with like sexism, like how do you think your trauma has like informed your worldview? And I guess like a point that I've been like considering with myself a lot is like, do you think we're too far gone? Like we've had traumatic ass lives. Like, do you think we're too far gone for healing, or do you think that like healing is something that we can achieve for the rest of our lives?
um,
Again, that's heavy.
that's
I'm
a good
sorry.
question. No, I, I don't really know. I think I feel like I sound crazy when I say this, but I almost feel like I'm put on this world not to heal myself, but to heal others. Because I think I have very empathetic parts of myself where a lot of people, are able to share how, experiences that they've gone through that are traumatic that help them. And I almost feel like I get a healing from, when I speak to them and I share my stories of things that I've gone through because I've gone through quite a lot. A lot of things not even to do a sob story, but a lot of things that a lot of people, wouldn't be able to, pick back up and kind of keep going or stay positive with. But with a lot of that, I've realized that like I find my strength within myself, and I know that if I can find it within me, these other people can too. And I think a lot of the times we expect healing to have a certain timeline, but with healing, every person's timeline is different. So what takes me a day to heal can take somebody 3 months. Like I've noticed that, there's some things that I'm at my age starting to heal with now because I'm acknowledging them in ways that, are beneficial for me. I do think that, as I get older, I'll continue to heal from things and be able to do so for the rest of my life. So I want to say that, it'll be, a continuous process, but it's something you have to work with. It's not, something that comes easy. Um, I don't know. It's like, I don't know how to like say it, but I think it's just something that you have to kind of work on personally because
Yeah.
every person's different.
I know with myself, and I think honestly, like in our generation, we're a lot more aware about like the effects of like trauma, especially like in
hmm
childhood. And so I think overall, like our generation is a lot more willing to heal, which I think is a really positive thing. Like I know myself, like based on traumatic experience that I had as a child, I hated therapy. Like I did not want to go to therapy. I had one bad experience with a therapist and I was like, okay, I'm never fucking doing this again. Like you cannot make me. But
Yeah.
now that I've like, taken the time to find someone who understands me wholly and is there to help my growth and who can reflect my experiences and who can help me like not only just heal like emotionally, mentally, but also spiritually. Like I feel like I've been awakened to this process of healing that is going to last my entire lifetime. And like you said, I feel a lot of comfort and sanctity in helping others. And I don't know if maybe that's like our connection on the soul plane. I don't want to get too spiritual, but we've
Yeah.
definitely encountered each other in another life. Um, but yeah, no, and I've noticed, I don't know if you have too, but like with my parents, especially, like there's just like a lack of like you said, there's like a lack of acknowledgement about trauma. Like they just refuse to even see it. They have these like blinders on. And I know it's there because it was passed down to me and I'm having to fucking deal with it. So I know that the trauma is there, but there's almost like this unwillingness to confront things that are uncomfortable and scary and emotional and that, are literally passed down through your DNA. Um, so
Yeah.
I don't know. I do think, like you said, like healing is possible at any age, but it definitely does require the acknowledgement that there is something to heal. And a lot of
That, and
times,
I think,
oh,
oh,
sorry.
sorry, keep going. Keep going. I'll
I
talk after.
don't even remember what I was gonna say. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say a lot of the times I feel like comparison can play a really big role in it. I think
Yeah.
we've become accustomed to comparing our lives to other people's because we want to look at social media and the positives of everything. You know, it's very easy to look at the positive of one person's life versus yours and think that somebody's life is better than yours, even though you have no idea what's going on beyond the surface.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the times when you stop comparing, because if you really look at it, a lot of us would stop suffering if we realize that every person is suffering.
Yeah.
Everybody is going through something. So once you realize that, everyone is going through something, you're going to start to feel a little less alone. But I think it's hard for us sometimes to take into account that, like, that's the reality of things because we're so used to looking at the positives of everybody else's life.
Yeah. Okay, well, this has been great. Now I'm going on to the segment of the show where it's Do You Remember When? I hope you thought of your story. So this is going to be where you share a story about us this time. So the other way around from earlier in the show. And yeah, just, I mean, it doesn't have to be funny. It doesn't have to be whatever. It can be some profound life lesson or something just super mundane. So take it away.
Um, I can't think of a life lesson right now, but one like thing of our childhood that keeps popping up in our head is I feel like we used to have dance offs at Lake Mission Viejo with our family, but it was like the kids. And it was all of us kids that looked like each other, but again, still didn't look like anybody else. And we would have these big, huge, like family get togethers, barbecues, the lake, and we'd have our little hip hop music, going. And all of us kids are pop locking, dropping, jerking, all types of dances as like, all these little white kids are, around us and our surroundings. But I think that's just so funny. Like even then we just felt so comfortable with like the people that were around us and having like, you know, people that look like us that we didn't care about like what was going on outside of us. And I feel like some of my best memories as a child or even with you were when we were around like that family, like people
Our
that look like us and made us feel comfortable.
our created family, the family that we like
Yes.
made for ourselves.
Or like friends of family that became our cousins.
Our play cousins. People don't know what
Yes.
I mean when I say that, and I'm like, "What do you mean you don't
Really?
have play cousins?"
See, I don't even have to say play cousins because most people are like, "Oh, okay, you're cousins."
Yeah,
Yes, like you
yeah.
get it. Like yes, like family friends that are close enough to be cousins.
See, okay, your people get that, my people don't get that, out in Orange County. So, again,
Yeah,
we're circling back to the
yeah.
differences.
Most people I've met understand it. So that's our 180 right here.
We're circling back to the start of the show. So I guess that's time to wrap up. Thanks for joining me. I'm so happy to have you on here. I'm sure that there will be an episode in the future and we can talk about something that's a lot more fun. Um, but make sure that you guys who are listening and watching, make sure you rate and subscribe and review it because it helps us get discovered. Follow the socials. It is Unfiltered WKM, so Unfiltered with Kaiya McCullough, but just the initials of it. And make sure you check out merch that is available for 2 Cent Sports. I don't know if we have merch at this point when this episode is being released, but there's definitely merch for the brand as a whole at 2centsports.shop. And yeah, tweet us any comments you have. Let us know what you think. Super excited to see you guys next week.
Thank you.